Sound? Sound, yeah? Still recording? Yeah. Okay. I'm just going to go from the last question, okay? Some people believe that gang activity has gone up during the pandemic. Is that something you agree with or not?
What we actually saw was a reduction of violence and gang activity during the first lockdown. However, since the restrictions were lifted, the gang activity continued and went back to what the pre-lockdown levels were. What we also saw very interesting is how the gangs adapted to the situation that they faced. So whilst the public transport, for instance, and the number of people who were using public transport reduced significantly, that was a way of the gangs getting young people to go and deal drugs in other areas, so through county lines as we call them. So instead of using public transport, because obviously you could spot a young person in an empty carriage, and they started to use taxis as a way of transporting children across to different areas so that they can carry on their drug activity. So whilst the violence and activity reduced during the first pandemic, as soon as the restrictions lifted, we saw activity go back to where it was previously. So we unfortunately saw a number of murders happening, numbers of violent activity happening across the area. I think there's also an issue was that there was a issue around drug importations because everything was grinding to a halt. So again, what we saw was different gangs trying to were fighting over territory and fighting over drugs because there was less supply coming into the UK. And now we're in a situation where violence has actually increased and the pandemic has had a negative impact because we're seeing high unemployment rates, we're seeing young people not going to school, so they're more vulnerable to be exploited by gangs.
I think the sound is still going to pick up.
Could you check or small? I think